Would you join us in the pledge of allegiance?
There we go.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Mason, could we have roll call, please?
Ms. Bates.
Here.
Mrs. Fryrick.
Here.
Ms. Leopold Sharp.
Yeah, here.
Ms.
I'm sorry, sidebar, I apologize.
Bose now.
Here.
Mr. Robinson.
Here.
Mrs. Schrader.
Here.
Mr. Sears. Ms. Schaefer.
Here.
Mr. Toman.
And I should just announce that Mr. Toman is at the band banquet across the street. His son is the drum major. And Elise Atkinson, our student board rep, is at the band banquet because she's the other drum major.
That's why we get no parking tonight.
That's exactly why there was no parking this evening. So we anticipate he will probably be here. She may have to stay longer, so I'm not sure whether or not we excused her for the evening. And at the request of some of us, if your cell phone isn't turned off, if you'd be kind enough to do that, we would appreciate it. This is our November planning meeting. So this is the meeting when we discuss items on the agenda. There'll be an opportunity for public comment after each of those discussions. There'll only be, this has been advertised as a voting meeting. There'll only be one vote taken this evening, and it's a disciplinary matter, so it's not something there would be discussion about anyway. But if there's anyone in the audience who would...
I think personnel is listed as a voting.
I apologize, Ms. Bates. Thank you.
And the student.
Yes, I said the student disciplinary is voting. I'm sorry, Ms. Bates. But if anyone has general public comment that they'd like to present now at the beginning of the meeting, you're welcome to step to the microphone. We ask that you introduce yourself by name and address and limit your comments to 5 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this point? Hearing none, let me move on to the board presence report. It's my duty to report that we met following our regular monthly meeting on October 23rd, 2017, in executive session as permitted by Section 707 of the Sunshine Act for the purpose of discussing personnel matters. No action was taken, and the board met just prior to this evening's meeting for the purpose of discussing a student disciplinary matter. No action was taken at that meeting either. Mr. Robinson.
Madam President, let's see if I can remember this. Okay, the Nominations Committee is happy to announce that the nominations for board officers are open. We will accept nominations and notify all board members electronically after tomorrow's election. The nominating committee will meet on November 20th at 6:15 here. We will import cigar smoke from Cigar Smoke in a Bottle to fill the room. At which time we will develop the slate of candidates for presentation on December 4th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank God I got through it. Any questions?
Attaboy. And I believe if you're interested in serving as an officer of the board for the term beginning December the 4th, you should contact Mr. Robinson and tell him so. And that is a public meeting open to the board and to anyone in the committee who'd like to come as well.
So we look forward to seeing all of you there.
Mrs. Schaefer, Communications Committee discussion.
Yes. Instead of having a communications committee, a separate meeting, which we typically do since we've all been pretty busy, that sort of was rolled into this evening. I did have a preliminary meeting with Dr. Redding, and one of the 3 items for discussion involves personnel discussion, so I extended that invitation to Ms. Bates as personnel chair, so she attended that preliminary meeting as well. So, and that is a great segue into the first topic of for discussion tonight with respect to a few, let's see, back on the Personnel Committee meeting of May 12, 2015, we discussed the transition to the Ed Center's receptionist position to a position of administrative assistant for communications, and the long-time need for this type of support. So that was the first topic, and what we discussed basically was what we are currently doing, what we could be doing differently, and so I think at this point I'd like to open that up for discussion. I'm assuming this was your intention, correct, to do this okay, right, okay. And I think probably it's best if I turn it over to Dr. Redding at this point to sort of give an overview of that.
Sure. One of the pieces that I was trying to get my head around was what were the job expectations for that communications position, recognizing that it was a shared position with the receptionist. And I had talked to Judy, who has that position, and got some ideas of what the workload looked like, but really wanted to hear from the board and the board committee what expectations they might have or ideas that we could look at to expand on those responsibilities. Currently, there are duties for the newsletter, the social media, keeping the website up to date, sharing any of the news items that come through other sources, doing news releases, the York Suburban Pride, the Stall Street Journal, other notes. So on those types of things on the communication side, and then on the receptionist side, the mail, the door, being in charge of the incident command if there's in our all hazards plan, and some of those types of responsibilities. So looking for some feedback from the board on what might be appropriate for other responsibilities. And I think that position is currently charged with the annual report, and we have samples of that.
Well, not currently. It was initially. Well, that position wasn't. The committee did that the past 2 years. I think it's 2 years in Lois Ann. You might remember or you might recall that was done by the assistant superintendent.
Right.
Right.
Is the implication that that's underutilized, that position, or are we just looking to better focus it?
Not underutilized, no.
The other thing we talked about was maybe her having the capability to go out to take pictures if there's something going on in another building. How is that? And this is where some research was going to be done on the administration's part with respect to each particular building, who's taking pictures for what event, how that all works out. We did throw Wendy out there a couple times, saying she would probably be a good resource for Dr. Redding to, answer all those questions, because as committee members, we really didn't have a good handle of how those types of things are handled day to day. The thing we talked about was having her attend the communications committee meetings. So whether or not that would be worthwhile to just make sure we were all on the same page and see if she had any thoughts or interests as to other things she possibly could be doing that, just hasn't been on our radar, hasn't been brought to our attention. So that was another topic of discussion.
I think, John, to your question, when the position came initially to Personnel Committee, it was considered a transition position because there was some up and running that needed to happen with doing some of the newsletters and the other things that were just being developed. So there was the idea that maybe at some point down the line that position could either expand more in communication or so it's not...
Transition's over now. What do we do with the position?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So I think that was, to begin with, it was set up as a half and half, and I think it was always, I mean, you were there for those discussions too, whether it needed to stay there at half and half or not. Another thing that I know has come before communications, and I know Ellen, you've been involved in these discussions, are how, the greater community is approached as far as, trying to get information out if you're not sitting on Facebook and you're not all the time, looking at the website and that sort of stuff. And so I think there was the idea that there was a database that was gonna get, created and added to, and I think that, fell under her, capability too, and I don't know exactly where we are with that. I think that was a real outreach for people in the community that,
That was a very time-consuming task, as I
Right.
recall, and sort of was put on the back burner with everything else that was going on, just beginning of school and various things. So, but that was sort of an issue, at least was my understanding, that would eventually, that would fall on those shoulders. And I think at one point, at least I think when I was communications chair, we hoped that, eventually that might even be, we might have the means to have that as a full-time position, given the fact that, that's sort of a common position among other school districts. But for the time being, we were happy just to have somebody who would be responsible for social media and those kinds of things. In the past, we had very limited presence. This is sort of a new concept for us. I don't know, 2 or 3 years? Is all we've really...
I think concerted. I think
Yeah.
that there were various people
Piecemeal.
in different parts of the district that were doing things.
Well, and as the database that someone brought up, again, going through all the minutes from personnel and communications that I could put my fingers on, there was also a mailer that went out to every address in the school district to ask if they'd like to be part of that database, and to what end. So there were different options to opt into just the newsletters versus I don't know what extreme. So that did happen, and that mailer did go out, but where we are with respect to the database and the number of folks that signed up, I don't know.
I don't know the number, but I know that it's operational because I have received emails at what I would consider my personal email address, not my YSSD email address. So I know that it's used from time to time.
But that might be something that we, as a board, could ask that position to do, is to assess where that effort has gone, where we think it could go, and then report back, at least to communications.
And I think the question that Dr. Redding asked was, I guess it answers part of his question. Are there other things that we think this position could be doing? But I think to the point what communications has done is the whole communications plan, if you will. The district needs to be kind of looked at. How do we communicate with not only those people who have internet access or Facebook, but those who do not?
Right.
And how are we getting to that portion of our population who just don't have that capability and would rather be sitting there with something in their hand, or would like to have the calendar again, or whatever it is, and to maybe start having those discussions again about, I think that there was a bit of discussion actually last spring or something with maybe there's a way we could figure out how to get that calendar back out there again that people were really looking for in some way or other, and districts do it in various ways.
Well, it was my understanding that this mailer that went out to every address sort of addressed that if people were interested in getting emails or hard copies would be available of various
I thought it was more electronic
things.
communication.
Well, and again, maybe I could be wrong,
Yeah,
but that's something to clarify. And in this, how many of our people really have that need when perhaps it may be fewer than we anticipate.
Well,
So are we asking the administration to come to us with a job description that readdresses, is that what this is about? Is that the expectation?
I was under the impression it was informational for Dr. Redding.
Okay.
Yeah.
I-
I'm confused about it.
One other thing that I think was on the plate and was delayed somewhat was there was at some point intended to be a complete overhaul of the website. I don't believe that ever happened, did it, Ms. Mason? I'm seeing,
No.
Yeah.
and you know, whether this is the time or whether that would be
I
more,
think that was to be on that desk.
it was, but whether that would be more, concurrent with
I forgot about
the
that.
arrival of a new administration, I'm not really certain. I do believe one of the reasons that the position was structured as it was the sense was it wasn't a good use of resources to have a full-time receptionist. That the receptionist type duties were insufficient for a full-time position. And I think there was one point when a lot of people took turns a few hours a day there and they wanted some greater consistency.
Well, I'll just add for the rest of the board's sake to hear this. We did talk about other channels of distribution for those newsletters. To Ellen's point, those that maybe aren't using electronic communication, if there's places that hard copies could be left other than district buildings that are in the community. So we did have a little bit of a discussion about that as well.
And I don't know, are we currently offering hard copy, stacks of hard copies of the newsletter?
Not that,
Currently?
no.
Okay.
No.
I mean, that might even be a start, just to have some available within the, the various buildings. I mean, our orange postcards, come to mind, but I don't know. I would be curious what kind of interest there is out in the community of the people who don't have access to the internet, how interested they are in the school district,
Yeah, I know.
frankly.
Mhm.
And I don't know that
Well,
we know that.
I think that information was surveyed,
Yeah.
and so I don't know where it went or what happened with it, but I think we should have that.
That's certainly something we talked about in
Right,
communications.
and
but-
I think that mailer that went out to every household was supposed to bring back that information.
And maybe Judy has that information.
And maybe
I don't
she
know.
does.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Right.
yeah. And if not, I'm sure Wendy does.
Is that a standalone mailing?
Yes.
And were the recipients supposed to send it back with their own postage?
Well, they could go,
Or county?
I went online and signed up, so of course, for those who
But
want
those,
electronic.
you don't have electronic,
Yeah.
That's what we're
Means.
trying to look at.
right.
I can't remember whether it was a self-mailer with a.
Yeah,
Mrs.
it's
Flyer.
it's
Do we have
been several
plans
years
to-
now, so,
Refresh that somehow or to do it periodically?
Well, I think that's what we're asking now.
yeah, that's what
Yeah.
we're trying to
That-
find
I
out.
think that
Yeah.
I
he's
would
asking
throw
for
out,
direction
I'd throw out
and
the tax bills as the, because everybody's gonna get that hard copy. Nobody, at least,
Well, that's when we send out
That's-
the annual report.
and make that part of the annual report.
What part
The
of the
questionnaire,
Sure.
to identify what you want and how you wanna get it.
But that doesn't really go out to every address that, if you're a renter or something, you're not gonna get that. So I think we actually,
Heck of a start.
well, it is, and, but I don't think we have
But
to.
you're right, there's no one
I don't think
source
we
other
have
than
to-
just a universal mailing list.
Which is what
we
we
did. Yeah.
And so I think that information is there somewhere.
In some form or other, there is some kind of
Yeah,
information. that should
so
not-
before we
all we
reinvent
want
it,
is-
I think we
Yeah.
should go find out if somebody has that.
You didn't
I'd like to know
expect
a
to
little
open
bit
such
about
a can
how
of worms,
big the
did you?
problem is.
What'd you say?
I'd like to
I
know
think
how
we
big
have
the
some
problem
things to
is.
do on that piece of the topic.
Okay, now you had two other
Two other-
I do.
The hard
The other one is more, I think, more informational in nature. There was an effort that the Communications Committee, was, on, let's see, the last one was February of 2017, about parent engagement. And at that meeting, it was reported that a newly formed committee to develop greater parent engagement, particularly with those who might have a more difficult time. The committee is in the very early stages and has yet to define a concrete goal or direction. Mrs. Bridget Englert, former York Suburban School District Director of Pupil Personnel Services, is chairing this committee. So at this point, we've not had a report back about that, and Dr. Redding was going to follow up on that or
Yeah.
research that, so.
And I did start asking some questions. There are a few things, not a whole lot, and I don't know how much I'll be able to report, but I did
Okay.
start digging a little bit on that one.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the third topic was the superintendent search and how to engage the community with that piece. And so we talked a little bit about that, but at the same time, that's for the new board to decide. I don't know, Dr. Redding, if you'd like to throw out any.
Well, my conversation certainly has been that when the new board is seated on the 4th of December, that the first item we discuss is that process that they wish to follow. I've already made some preliminary contacts with consulting firms that do that for districts, and 2 of them are available to talk to the board on December 4th and outline how that process might look for York Suburban School District, and particularly the piece that addresses the community engagement in that entire process that would be critical for the district.
Is it appropriate to share what those agencies are and give you a head nod that we want to do that, or what's the next step?
The next step is for you to hear directly from them what they have to offer, and then decide if you want to use either one or you don't want to use either.
So we can expect that. That
Yes,
was my question. We
right.
can expect that on December 4th. Okay.
Yes.
Because I certainly would agree with that concept. Do we know who they are? Is that
Yes.
appropriate?
Actually, I don't know if that's an executive session topic because
No,
it's
that's fine.
contract involved.
Yes, that's fine. Let's make it so.
And I don't have anything other than a hold the date from
Okay.
2 of the folks that I've talked to,
Okay.
or
That's fine. Thank you.
consult firms.
Yep. Anything else?
No, unless the board has anything, or I don't know if you want to go public.
Well, I
or
was
not.
going to say,
Yeah.
if there is any public comment on this, you're free to step to the mic and express your opinion. Seeing no movement, thank you. Dr. Redding, the acting superintendent's report.
Okay. First item is the Communities That Care report. And we're here. Okay, step forward.
Thank you very much for having us this evening. I don't know if I need this microphone or not.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
do.
you're-
I do, for recording.
Recording
I do. I'm Jill Uri. I'm the co-president of CTC. With me also is Greg Kern, the other co-president, and Ann Cook, our community mobilizer, who's handing out our newsletter, most recent newsletter for your, just have some reading material. So thank you so much for having us this evening. We appreciate it. Our agenda is, I will be giving you just a little brief background history on the organization. Greg will talk about our current programming, and Ann will speak to some of our new initiatives. We'll try to be brief. I want to recognize Dr. Redding and Rich Robinson. So we have representation on our prevention board for both the administration and the school board. And I would also be remiss if I didn't recognize Emily Bates and Kathy Schaefer, who were previously very involved in this organization, and they could probably do this presentation, my part at least, and you can correct me for what I say incorrect. All right, so the York Suburban Communities That Care Alliance was established in 2001 with grant funding from the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. We received 2 major grants for about $280,000 at the time. And the CTC programming is initially a prevention-based model to address problem behaviors. By understanding the risk and protective factors within the community, programming is developed then accordingly. So to understand such risks and the protective factors as well, we administer we don't administer, but we use a tool called the Pennsylvania Youth Survey, or the PAYS. That is administered every 2 years. It goes to the 6th, 8th, and 10th and 12th graders in the district. So you also have some continuity then over those 2-year periods. It was just administered this fall, so we hope to have results by the spring. Based on the data from the PAYS, that's how that CTC then adjusts its programming. The PAYS, from the last PAYS study, we saw an uptick in stress and mental wellness issues, and Greg will speak to how we are addressing some of those issues as an organization. With the state funding almost now non-existent for CTC, we have been fundraising since 2004. We are supported largely through donations, some minor grant funding, and then we also have some fundraising activities like our community variety show. That's our major fundraising activity. In 2015, we became a 501c3 organization, which does let us apply for a lot more grant opportunities. So we are looking at those. In 2015, we revised our mission statement, which is now mobilizing people and resources to protect and empower our youth and strengthen our community. Last year, we also finalized a 3-year strategic plan to continue the organization's viability and work in our district and the community. Since 2002, we've contracted a community mobilizer for the organization who coordinates and administrates the programming for the board. Christy Atkinson had served in that role for the past 2 years, and we just had a change to Ann Cook. We're thrilled to have her on board, and she's our new mobilizer. She started this summer. So we really continue to value our relationship and the partnership with the district, and look forward to continuing to address any problem behaviors that we see. And I will now turn it over to Greg to provide on our programming.
As Jill mentioned, my name is Greg Kern. I'm the co-chair of the CTC. And just some of the programs that we help with. We do have a Big Brothers Big Sisters program where we pair high school and middle school students as the bigs with elementary-aged littles to provide bonding and skill building. We have student boards both at the middle school and high school where we provide leadership skills, diversity, acceptance, and service opportunities. We have some awards that we give out, the Above and Beyond Turnaround Awards, where we recognize excellence and notable turnarounds in middle school and high school students. We have school and community drug education programs, and just as a for instance, one of those that we did this past year was a heroin educational session. Really, we did something for students at the school, and then we also had something for the community that was after school. As Jill mentioned, we do the community variety show. We have a multicultural festival where we provide diversity education and celebration in our district. We have a new family inclusion program where we work to ease the transition of new families coming into the York Suburban School District, just to give them some way to be able to connect with other families in our school district. We also do a nutrition education in the elementary schools through Memorial Hospital's Kids in the Kitchen program. One new thing that we are doing this year is what's called a STOMP, which is a student-teen outreach for mental illness prevention. And this is a few different phases. We do staff education, we also have student education, and there is a health fair as well. So those are a few of the programs that we do. As Jill mentioned, we really do look at the PAYS data and start to look at things that we may find alarming from the student responses that we need to address, and then we try to tailor our programming towards what those needs may be. So that PAYS data is very informational to us to help us determine what kind of programs it is that we need to look to fulfill. And now I'm going to turn things over to Ann, who's going to talk about some of our future endeavors.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Want to follow up on something that Greg mentioned. In addition to having the STOMP program in the middle school, we are hoping to bring that to the high school after the first of the year. At the middle school, we had 10 staff and teachers trained. They were the student assistance team. And we would like to do that at the high school. And then for next year, we would like to bring that teacher mental health first aid training into the district as a district-wide initiative. They can accommodate, I believe, somewhere up to 35 teachers, so that would have to be scheduled probably as a staff development day. But it's an 8-hour session, and teachers and staff are given an overview and training on how to deal with students who may be facing mental health issues. So that's hopefully on the docket for next year. We're also working on getting a stress reduction yoga program into the high school. And the issue right now that we have is finding a suitable time frame for students to be able to take that. We had planned it as an after-school activity, but we find students are apparently already stressed about all of the after-school obligations they have, so we certainly don't want a stress reduction class to add to their stress. So we are working with the school on that, and we're offering that in conjunction with the YWCA, who has a stress and trauma certified yoga instructor. And the last thing is that right now there is an increasing emphasis on bringing mindfulness and wellness programming into the elementary schools. We do a lot at the middle school and high school level, but the premise behind getting earlier programs into schools is that if we can bring coping skills and also identify students at risk earlier, then the less mitigation we have to do later on. So Valley View is being very proactive in this, and they have asked for CTC's help in identifying some potential programming to bring into the school, and hopefully as a pilot program for the other elementary schools. So I'm working pretty closely with Valley View on that right now, and we hope to get something in place for next summer, perhaps.
Kelly, thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of the CTC staff? Mrs. Schaefer.
To your last point about Valley View, what plans for Yorkshire as well at some point?
Well, I have not yet met with Dr. Stoltz at Yorkshire. It seems that all of the elementary schools are very interested in wellness programming, but right now it seems fairly fragmented, and it looks like there's a need for more structure. So right now, Valley View is the one that has really reached out to us, and hopefully, if we find a good fit, the other elementary schools will also be able to take advantage of that.
And then I have another question. I'm not really sure who to address it to, but early on, one of the other purposes of the PACE survey was to, determine your risk factors, and then your programming was based on the risk factors as you are progressing and doing now. One of the challenges we had was the limitations of the research-based programs that fit within the CTC model to provide to our students. I guess what I'm asking is, what does the CTC model look like now? Are you still able to use those research-based programs, or how do you determine the need or a specific need? How do you determine that the program is in fact going to be effective if they're research-based or not?
Ann just attended the district
Regional
prevention
meeting.
Okay,
meeting, so
okay.
she has some good insight.
And we talked a lot about programming, and CTC has available to it a plethora of different programs through the Epicenter at Penn State. And the nice thing about these programs is they can be customized, and they are evidence-based. They do have data to support their effectiveness. So it's, I think, an issue of looking at what we have available through the CTC resources. And the nice thing is that there is grant funding in place for a lot of these, and then looking at the district's needs and seeing how those mesh. There is a lot more available out there than I even realized until this past regional meeting. So, for example, you talked about family engagement. There are several programs available that address family engagement, and they have been administered long enough so that they do have supportive data to show their success. So it's like finding the right fit.
Is Big Brothers Big Sisters, are they still one of the approved
Yes,
programs?
they are.
And that would be the one that your current, not you, but CTC is using?
We do support
Okay.
the Big Sisters Big
Yeah,
Pro. Yes.
okay.
And Kathy, I would also add that we're trying to make a better effort to look at our programming and internally try to develop some more metrics around what we are doing, and so that we can represent to the community, because we do find it's difficult to explain CTC.
Yes, it
It's
is.
certainly not in one or two sentences. So we were hoping that by developing some of those metrics, we'll be able to show more of the impact in different ways, and then get our message
Okay.
out there a little
All
bit
right,
better.
thank you.
Other board questions?
You guys serve as the grant writers too. You mentioned grants, so
Wow.
you're the collective.
We are very fortunate that Ann has some experience in that area.
And we are aggressively looking at grant opportunities, and again, a lot of the grant opportunities go for specific purposes. So if we have a program right now that fits into a grantor's
Yeah, that's the trick,
planning,
matching the need for the grant.
that's what
Yeah,
the Resource Development Committee is doing right now. So matching our current programming to what's available, and then also looking at what we hope to do in the future and finding the appropriate resources for grants.
Before you sit down, does anyone in the public have questions they would like to ask? If not, we thank you for your presentation.
And thank you for your time.
And as we say to the students, we would encourage you to stay, but we understand if you need to leave. Right?
Okay. Okay, next item, two items on the agenda sort of go together. The first one listed is a quarterly report of where the district is in regards to the goals that were set by the administration and the administrators, I'm sure, during their planning meetings ramping up to the school year. And just making the board and the public aware that the work that has been set by the administrators to accomplish these goals, I have evidence based on the meetings I've held with our administrators over the last 2 weeks that they certainly are on target to accomplish and their work on their individual goals and their building goals certainly aligns with what you have here as district goals. Number one, centering around, what are we doing as it relates to supporting the diverse academic needs of our students in all areas from the gifted through career readiness. Number two, what's happening in the mental health area. And I'm going to come back to that because when we reviewed those goals, that really was a nice segue into the item C on our agenda. Number three, looking at the culture and practices, again, trying to be more inclusive as our demographics change, and we heard a report last meeting on the changing demographics of our student body and how do we adjust programs and services to address those changing student demographics, what strategies are out there as it relates to academic growth and achievement, and when there's not the expected level of growth and achievement, what interventions are we using and what instructional strategies might be out there that should be incorporated into our practices. And the fifth overall goal dealt with financial and fiscal responsibility and some of the major benchmarks for this year were the teacher contract, the support staff contract, the budgeting process, capital needs, and all of those things that really are important to the well-being of the district. So just wanted to reassure the board that we're making great progress towards meeting those goals as an organization. As I mentioned, number two on that list dealt with researching the mental health needs, and I talked to Natalie early on about some of the great things that were happening and said this might be a great opportunity to maybe give the board an update on what is happening there. And Natalie, if you would step forward, and we'll cue up the presentation, and the show is yours.
You may remember last year I came to you and discussed bringing school-based mental health services into the district. We were approved by the state to do that. The Community Behavioral Health Services approved us to participate in the program. We had 2 agencies apply, interviewed those, and chose PCBH, which is Pennsylvania Comprehensive Behavioral Health, as the agency that we wanted to come into our buildings. PCBH is a licensed psychiatric clinic that delivers outpatient services. They do have psychiatrists on staff, as well as psychologists, social workers, and different counselors. The middle school and high school currently serve as satellite offices for PCBH now. So any student in the middle school or high school can access outpatient services during the school day through a referral process. It's a fairly simple referral process. It's a 1-page sheet. We get a little bit of information from the parent that they would agree to allow us to make the referral to PCBH, and then pretty much PCBH takes it, checks on insurance, and calls the student in for the initial assessment, for what kind of services would be best for those. They do encourage that parents come in to that initial kind of assessment to determine services that are most appropriate. Students can and are seen during the day. Often when we made referrals before to outside agencies, there was a little follow-through because parents, everybody's busy in the evening. How do I get my child to therapy in the evening? So we have made that available now during the school day for students who qualify for their services. PCBH will do individual, group, and family therapy based on what the needs are of the student. So sometimes it may happen, PCBH is over by Giant somewhere, is their main office. So if they need to do a family session in the evening, they will just have the family come in, but then run the student sessions during the school day. So confidentiality is maintained, both educational FERPA and health confidentiality, HIPAA, is followed and maintained. The only information that PCBH will share with the school is what the parent and student agreed to allow them to share with the school. So it is completely as if it was not happening in the schools. We're just making it available because if a student isn't mentally ready to learn, they're not getting the full benefit of their education. So we're just making that a little bit easier. The school's role, once the student is identified, is simply to facilitate getting them to that appointment. And that typically is just providing them with a pass from the guidance counselor that says at 11:30 you report to the room where the services are being provided. So far to date, last week anyway, to date, high school had 33 students referred. 30 of those were made by the school counselors and 3 were made by parents. The middle school had 29 students referred and all of those were referred by the school counselor. At the high school currently being seen are 11 students on a regular basis by the counselors from PCBH, and at the middle school 14. The remaining students are kind of waiting for insurance to agree to pay, or for parents to be able to come in for that initial assessment meeting, but they're all ready to roll as soon as those pieces are put into place. What we're seeing as the most frequent referrals at the high school level, anxiety and depression seem to be the largest issues that students are being referred for. And the bottom one there was unknown. A student just asked if they could be seen by a counselor, did not want to share what their issue was, and that's perfectly fine. So we do have one unknown. At the middle school, it seems to be a little wider range, but it also may be a little different way of tallying the students, because you'll see again that anxiety is high, and depression is right under it, with 6 students as anxiety and depression at 5. But sadness, anger, aggression, we have had students seen for suicidal ideation, abuse, social issues, and so on and so forth at the middle school. Comments that we've kind of received from the public, parents, students, it's a wonderful resource. They're very timely in meeting student referral requests. Often when parents call outpatient services, they're told, we don't have an appointment for 3 months, for 6 months. Typically, once the referral is accepted by PCBH, we're seeing students within 2 weeks. So it's very timely, much faster than they can get in the community. Constant communication with the counselors. We have a lead counselor, Tina Howe, at the high school. Lead counselor for PCBH is Angie Adams at the middle school. They're in weekly contact with PCBH. What more does PCBH need from us, or us asking, hey, we really need this from you, and that works very well. We've seen a decrease, and it's early. We're 2 months in, so we don't have hard, concrete data, but the counselors are feeling a bit of a decrease in those long visits to the guidance office where a student just comes in, and it may take hours for us to get them settled down enough that we can get them back into the classroom. It seems that when the students know, I have my appointment on Thursday, they get through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So that has been a subjective observation of the counselors. Parents and students have made very positive comments, and the staff, a little bit of concern at the beginning when we started, how would staff respond to us pulling students out of class, and the response has been nothing but positive from staff, that students seem better able to focus when their mental health issues are met. Question?
Are you surprised by the numbers? Are they what you kind of expected?
I thought 30 seemed a little high to me with only 2 months in, but maybe the numbers will decrease. We knew we had a need, so maybe now in the coming months it won't be 30 in the next 2 months. So it seemed a little high to me, but if we referred them all at once.
This may be a little bit early on in the year, but do we know how long the average student is continuing with this? That later in the year you'll be able to tell whether they needed 3 visits or 30 visits or...
Yeah, I believe the students, we don't know that. It is far too early to tell, but it is certainly, I don't think any of these students are 3-visit students. These are students who need therapy, not just a quick kind of touch base with somebody. So these are students who qualify under whatever regulations PCBH uses, that an insurance will, yes. Mm-hmm.
I might have asked this question before, but should a family not have the means, is there some mechanism for them to still get assistance?
And PCBH will help families get insurance through Access. So a student with a mental health diagnosis qualifies for Medicaid, and PCBH will walk the family through how to get that insurance.
Okay. And the follow-up to that then is, how are families made aware that not only that exists, but just the program exists itself? How is that conveyed to families?
Well, as you go to your communication, it was sent out in Pride. I believe it is on building websites.
Okay.
I believe it's on Infinite Campus.
Okay.
I believe, but again, it's all kind of internet-based.
Right.
We did have at the open houses at the middle school and the high school, PCBH did have a table.
Okay.
So if parents came to open houses, they saw that they had the opportunity to ask.
And how would one know if they don't have the means that they would work with them to still obtain how widely known is that, or how is it?
Yeah, I believe that is communicated when the counselor, before making the referral to PCBH, will call the parents. Are you all right with us making this referral? And if the parents say, I can't afford that, that's when that conversation would happen.
All right, thank you.
I wanted to make sure, it looked like Dr. Ellis had something to
And
say
she actually
too.
just referenced that. In terms of communication of this program, the counselors have done an outstanding job. We really have 7 outstanding counselors between the middle school and the high school the personal relationships they have with the students, and then also in many cases the parents, have facilitated this information being shared very well. So they're personalizing, they're making the phone call home saying, I know you've had concerns about getting your child into therapy. We now have this program available. Would you be interested? And then they walk them through the process. So the word of mouth directly from counselor to families, I believe, has been as effective as any of the advertising that we've done about this program.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to give a little time, not my whole time. Everybody's seen during the school day, you said, and you said that for the staff that's working fairly smoothly. And I'm wondering about the students. How did they feel about coming out of class, as far as being, does somebody knock on the door, come out for your mental health issues?
I believe everything I'm hearing from the guidance counselors are that the students, even though they may be missing a class, that overall kind of arching anxiety or depression being dealt with, that they're not minding missing that one class. I do think we kind of try to rotate it, so it is not always social studies class. It's not always algebra that we're being pulled out of. Nobody knocks on the door. The student is given a pass at the beginning of the day by their first period teacher or whatever. They know when they leave, the counselors, next week, Wednesday, at whatever, so they have that kind of heads up, and then they just get the pass. And it's to the nurse's office, actually, at the high school is where the counselor is. And at the middle school, it is just a room in a middle hallway. So they just get a pass to go to that room. But nobody knows where they're going unless the student chooses to share where they're going.
And I'm wondering if all the sessions are individual, or are there any group sessions?
Currently, there are individual. If we have, because of the insurance piece that is paid for by insurance, if we have a group of students that has the same need, they could be put into a group and serviced that way. But that's all insurance-based, and insurance approves will pay for individual or will pay for group.
And is there a limit through either our end, or would it only come from the insurance end as to how many sessions?
No limit on our end.
There's on our end.
On our end. I've not heard, as long as PCBH can document whatever they have to provide to insurance, that the student is making progress, I don't think there's a limit there either.
And just one final question, and that is that on one of the reasons for a referral, you had ADHD. And I'm curious whether that is a diagnosis that's being given by the group in our campus, or is it, I thought that was something that was a little more structured to get that as a diagnosis.
I don't know for sure. It may be a student who is already diagnosed with ADHD and is having difficulty with organization or time management, or it may just be the counselor saying attention problems and just it was easier to write ADHD when I ask him.
Right.
But I don't know the answer.
Well, I'm really pleased with. Thank you for bringing the report back to us, and I was excited last spring when we heard that we were going to be able to have this, and I think it's great.
Mr. Robinson?
Just looking at the figures of the students who were identified, the number is 33. And 11 are currently being counseled.
At the high school.
At the high school. And then at the middle school, it's 29 with 14 being counseled. What jumped out at me there is we have a third of the students who were identified being counseled currently at the high school, and then about half at the middle school. That still leaves a significant number of students who are not receiving services. Is that correct?
It does, and part of that is we had one student, it took weeks to figure out even who the insurance was, because the state had his name spelled wrong. So PCBH tracked that down. So it can be issues with insurance. It's not that PCBH says, we're not seeing this child. So it's an issue maybe with insurance, or parent, like, I can't get in till this week for that assessment, so they'll wait until the parent can come in and do the assessment with the student. So it's not that PCBH is saying we're not or won't see this student. It's something outside of PCBH's hands that's postponing.
Well, just looking at the state of the delivery of medical care, and especially mental health care these days, I'm just going out on a limb thinking there are going to be students who are not going to make it. They're not going to make the cut because of insurance or for whatever reason it comes across. They're still in need of services here, and the question, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Those of my colleagues here will know that's never stopped me before. Would that be the kind of situation if we had that many students? I mean, 2/3 at the high school and half at the middle school, that we should consider having an on-staff social worker that could help address those concerns and challenges? Hypothetically, of course.
Hypothetically, it certainly would help. Those students also, we also have anxiety groups running that aren't paid for by insurance. Family Child Resources comes in and runs anxiety groups at both our high school, middle school, and some groups even down at the primary level. So there are other options than therapy, if you will, in the buildings, but certainly our guidance counselors are not therapists. They do the best they can.
Right, of course.
But
that's understood. But in your initial remarks, I think you were saying that you thought the numbers were high. If they continue to be high, that would seem to be that there's evidence of a challenge there that we can take a closer look at.
For sure.
Any question? Yes?
Okay. Mrs. Schrader?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what others have said, how pleased I am, and thank you that, you've gone to bat for this program. I think in this day and age with the mental health issues that are out there, for us to be able to offer this to our students, and, thank you to the administration and the guidance departments for stepping up and helping our kids, because goodness knows there's a huge need out there, but just hats off and thank you, and whatever, I'm sure I speak for the board that, whatever we can do to facilitate it is, we're there for you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hassenfuss, I want to echo everyone else's comments and tell you that I was approached by one of our guidance counselors who spoke so glowingly of this program. And what was most important to that staff member was that PCBH is bringing in counselors with expertise. So these are not social workers. These are trained therapists with particular expertise. So if there's a child who has an abuse situation, they bring in a counselor for that child who has abuse. If they have a problem with depression, they bring in someone who specializes in depression. And the counselor told me that there's some other programs, and perhaps it was the other vendor, I'm not sure, where they would have a counselor in the building 5 days a week, all day long. But it was one person who was essentially serving whoever needed services, regardless of the cause of their mental health concerns. And this counselor spoke so glowingly of the fact that we had opted rather for a program that would bring people in as students needed the services and bring in specialists to identify and serve their particular needs. And so that person felt that this delivery model was, even though someone isn't there all day, every day, was vastly superior because students were getting the kind of expert service that they could really benefit from. And this is a long-time counselor, and they could not have been more overjoyed because they said, now I can really do counseling because I'm not trying to be a therapist, which I'm not trained to be. So this is just to absolutely laud the work that's been done.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hassenfuss.
Can I just ask if I don't know if anyone in the public wants to comment on this?
Actually, I had a question, if I might.
Absolutely.
Does PCBH have provision for any crisis intervention, or are they able to refer a student to another resource?
Yes.
Because I think it sort of tags on to what Rich was saying. If you have a situation where a student is in crisis and can't wait 2 weeks,
I have one more question.
they do that, yes.
Mrs. Hoskins, I have one other question. Sort of speaking to Mr. Robinson's concern about students who still haven't been served, is it possible that some of those numbers maybe were identified at the end of the first marking period? That it's not as though they were all identified at the beginning of the school year and they've been waiting for 12 weeks. Some of them have been identified much more recently.
Could possibly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you again, Natalie. Item D is an action item. Seeking.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Mason, we could do a short roll call on that.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Well, I'm assuming Ms. Mason Mrs. Irwine will put the text of the motion in the minutes. Do we need to read it orally? Since it was in the agenda, I didn't think we needed to read it orally.
Typically we do, but whatever's on the agenda, it does get carried over.
Is the board
into
comfortable with
minutes.
that this evening? Thank you, yeah. Yes, thank you. You're on.
Okay. Next item is the first draft of the school calendar for the 18-19 school year. I think it was maybe the third day I was here. Started looking at what conversations had taken place up to that point on putting the recommended calendar together. This calendar does start school a week later than we did the current year, so we're not starting with students until August 22nd, and I think this year we were in like August 14 or 15, something the week earlier. So this calendar does reflect that change. It does identify some professional development activities that have already been planned. We looked at trying to maintain continuity with instruction, so minimal times where students are in, students are out, students are in, which we had a couple times in this calendar. Parent conferences identified as they are normally held, where teachers are spending evenings, long days, and then this calendar would trade off of that time that was actually spent for parent conferences in a trade day. Standard operating with early dismissals for benchmark times whenever marking periods are ending or final exams or midterms are being given, and having our last student day be May 30th, identifying 2 in-school, in the school year snow makeup days around the Easter break, and then adding the rest really on at the end of the school year. Did have an opportunity to talk extensively with the administrative team to make sure we were doing things that made sense. The transition day is in place with a gentle start and new students coming on the 22nd of August, and then all students coming on the 23rd. So this is a first posting and subject to questions.
This represents how many days for students?
180 days for 190. The 2 of the 190 days are activities beyond the school day, and they're not specifically identified on this calendar as this is that day, but there are 2 days of the 190.
And all of the dates in October and March, the 4 days that you're indicating teacher conferences, is that like after school and in the evening?
Those would be, right, those would be evening conferences.
And then the days that they actually get off at the end, those are the end of the month?
The fall conferences would be made up on the 21st of November with a trade, and the March 8th would be the trade-off if parent. Right, and that's limited mostly to, help me out, K2, that week in March. Thank you, Dr. Furman.
So if they get all their conferences in, they don't have to, the teachers don't work on those days.
Right.
Bates, there's not going to be a need for snow days this year, correct?
No. Well,
Well,
I
this
don't
is
know.
1819.
I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
the
be
snow
here,
days are.
so you guys are on your own.
Yeah, 1819. Let's see how 1718 gets.
She is the official prognosticator for weather.
It's true, but pretty soon, we got next meeting,
Punxsutawney
we're gonna be okay.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, November 20th, is that what it is? 20th, we're good.
We're still okay.
Any public comment on the calendar? I saw some parents pick up copies. Help yourself to a copy. And Dr. Eng, do you intend that to be on the voting agenda for the November 20th
I
meeting?
see no reason not to, unless there's issues that we haven't addressed.
Just to clarify, am I reading this correctly, that in February, families have guaranteed days off for
15 and
trips
18.
on that Friday and Monday?
Staff do not. Staff would have to be here on February 15th.
That's not a trade day?
No.
Okay. Just for your information, that has been a point of discussion from time to time with regard to having promised time in the winter for travel and such. So I just wanted to clarify that I was reading that correctly, that for in terms of student time, those 2 days are guaranteed. Those aren't snow days.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then you can expect to see that on the agenda in 2 weeks. Anything else, Dr. Redding?
I think so. Yes, we have two administrators here with this evening. Dr. Ellis, first, might have some items that he wants to share.
Sure. I was worried that Elise would be here because I'd steal her thunder, because I know she always likes to talk about it. But it's really been a great last few weeks from an extracurricular perspective with our school. And I know I'm going to forget somebody, so hopefully I don't miss along the way. But just a few weeks ago, Trojan Theater put on 3 outstanding performances of 12 Angry Jurors. For those of you that know 12 Angry Men, now incorporate female members into the cast as well. I got the chance to see Saturday night, and I really enjoyed it. I had never seen the original, so it was a great perspective. But they put a lot of time and effort into it. 12 people on the stage, not allowed to leave at all except for intermission, was really a unique opportunity in their little black box setting, which was great. The band has had a number of outstanding performances. They did their showcases over the last month on the weekends. Their last showcase was a weekend ago, I believe, and they put on a great performance then Friday night here to wrap up their season, so a lot of kudos to them and what they put forward. This was a great weekend from athletic perspective from our cross-country teams. Hopefully you've seen the boys finish second in the state by just 2 points, so actually a little disappointment for a moment, but then really rejoicing in what they've accomplished. That program in 4 years has finished third twice. Has finished second 3 times and won a state title. And including Bryce Old, who finished second in the entire state in his race, he was a member of all 4 teams scoring, so it was quite an accomplishment for him. Our girls also took 11th in the state this past weekend. So kids do awesome in class. They really do well academically, but they also excel outside and take a lot of pride in all the activities that they're involved in. So it's been a neat couple of days or a few weeks from that perspective as seasons have wrapped up. I'm really proud of all the kids have accomplished, both in the classroom, but then also extracurricularly. So thanks for giving me a moment to share.
And questions?
Just clarify the drama. Who is the director?
The director is Shannon Metzler, one of our new English teachers we hired a couple years ago.
I just wanted
really
to, mention that, who spends the time doing
sure,
that.
She puts a lot of time and energy into
That's
it.
a big deal, so thank you.
And Dr. Furman, to make your trip worthwhile tonight.
Thank you. So when Dr. Redding sent the email asking, suggesting different topics we might discuss, I was, do I go professional development? Do I pull out the book study we're doing in faculty meetings? Or do I go the route of the data analysis and how the teachers are bearing down on how to best grow students' brains? But then I decided to go the route of how we're growing students' hearts this year. One of the things that I noticed with my transition from secondary to elementary was that crazy pace that exists at the high school also exists in grades 3 to 5. And I was really not comfortable with that. And so the staff and I reflected on that, and we talked about ways that we could slow down and grow one another socially, emotionally. And so one of the things that we decided to do this year is at East York we have a club program. And so twice a month for a whopping 1 hour, at half an hour each time, 1 hour a month, we put the textbooks away and the traditional school away, and the kids were able to select clubs that they thought they wanted to participate in, clubs that the teachers voluntarily supervised. And so we have our mini STEAM competitions in the Lego Club. You have Mr. Weaver and the chess club. And it's a mix of grades of kids from all of the grade levels are working together, learning from one another. Sometimes some coding going on. Sometimes they just want to sit and color and listen to music and talk with their friends. And so we have some creative crafts and coloring and stuff like that. So just trying to bring a little bit of balance. I'm still as competitive as any other principal in this district. My staff is just as focused on those scores as anyone else, but for 1 hour a month, we're growing other parts of our staff.
Good, that's good.
Ms. Bates?
I am curious about the book study, though. You didn't prepare. What book are you?
Since you asked, that's a good have. Yeah, Dr. Maloney had arranged a staff professional development opportunity, and she wrangled myself, Mrs. Bedell from the high school, and Mrs. Oathouse into creating a class for teachers for reaching at-risk students. And so Ms. Dell, Mrs. Oathouse put together a list of 7 or 8 books, and since I used to work most closely with the English department, I knew the ladies well, they knew me well, and I said, okay, what's going to help me in my transition here, something that would be really good, and so they recommended this book on culturally responsive teaching, and it's great. It's fantastic. The first third of the book is all about better understanding your students' culture, and not necessarily that you have to learn the 25 cultures of the kids in front of you, but some universal patterns to help you kind of break through a little bit more. A couple chapters on neuroscience, and then what does that mean for best practices in teaching, and how can we use that knowledge about culture and the brain to turn some of our dependent learners into independent learners. Really recommend it.
Thank you. That does sound good.
That's it for my report.
That concludes your
And,
report.
yes, unless there are questions for administrators.
Then we'll go to Ms. Mason on the business office report.
Thank you. The first 3 items I will be asking the board to approve will be items that relates to the capital projects to start moving on, writing the specs, then advertising and soliciting for bids. And then the last one will be approval of a resolution to recognize the East York Elementary School PTO as a civic and service organization, so that they can apply for their small games to have their handbag bingo. We did the same, with something similar last year to Yorkshire PTO for their bingo.
Thank you. Any questions?
And does that have to be re-upped every year, or once they're designated?
Once the board approves the resolution, we only have to do that once and done, but they have to apply for the license every year. It's only good for a year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Mason? Any questions from the public? Since Ms. Atkinson is still with the band, we will hear from her at our meeting in 2 weeks. I've just completely lost my agenda, so we're going to go to committee reports now. Mrs. Schaefer, do you have other things from the community?
I don't really.
Communications?
Dr. Ellis did a great job of, talking about all the great things that the high school's been doing recently, so I just leave it go at that.
Okay. Ms. Bates, personnel.
Thank you. You have before you the personnel report, which includes termination, appointment, employment, and volunteer winter coach. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions? Hearing none, the chair moves approval of the below-mentioned items.
Second.
Any board questions? If not, Ms. Mason, that can be a short roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson already spoke about the nominating committee plans. Are there other committee chairs who want to announce committee meetings? Mrs. Fryrick?
Facilities meets, this Wednesday, 4:30 here in the, conference room.
Okay. Facilities Wednesday at 4:30. Mr. Posnow?
We covered most of what we needed from finance in the last meeting, so the next finance meeting, there's no reason to meet, but we'll meet again in December.
Okay, so do you know the date offhand that you're canceling? The finance committee meeting on November 15th is canceled. Thank you. Anything, Dr. Redding, to share from the Lincoln Intermediate Unit this time? Nothing? Mrs. Fryrick, York Adams Academy?
No, we have all, 12 of our seats are now occupied at York Adams Academy, and graduation is set for December 19th. And I thank Dr. Redding for sharing the note that we received from one of the recent graduates. I think they've come forward to it.
Thank you. And I have been remiss, I didn't ask for public input on the Personnel Committee report or on Mrs. Fryrick's York Adams report. Mrs. Schrader, the York County School of Technology?
Yes, just to encourage board members to read the mini report that you should all have a copy of.
Okay. Anything else from the board? You'll see the link at item number 10 to the board meeting committee schedule. So for the month of November, facilities will meet on Wednesday. The board will meet again on Monday, November the 20th. And that will be the conclusion of this term of board service. And then on Monday, December 4th, the board will hold its annual reorganizational meeting. Mr. Robinson will kick that off. There'll be 3 new board members sworn in that evening. And the board will proceed then with electing officers and the other items of reorganization that are required under the school code, and then the December planning meeting agenda.
Oh, Lynn, I should mention, just for planning purposes, November 29 is academic standards and curriculum. I think we're still planning on that, aren't we, Dr. Redding?
Yes.
4:30.
Thank you. And would you mention that again on the 20th, just to remind us?
Sure.
Are there other comments or questions from the public who are here this evening? Then I'm going to take this opportunity without too much fanfare, and I think we'll skip the hats, Mrs. Schaefer, but just to take a moment to recognize 2 of our fellow board members who have recently retired from their professional duties. Mr. Robinson retired a couple of months ago. Is that true? He's laughing.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mrs. Schrader retired last Friday. And so we just want to applaud them for their service and their professional achievements and welcome them to the world of the retired.
And I'm not a good role model for retirement.
They can take care of you again in June, Dr. Redding.
We're glad you're not.
Thank you. The board will...
I just wanted you to know Lynn opted out of the party. She opted out. Finally, thank you. Thank you.
The board needs to meet again in executive session. We'll meet in 5 minutes at 8:35. Thank you very much. Good evening, folks.